Native American history has become intertwined with U.S. history. One of the darkest chapters of this shared history is the Indian boarding school period that began in the late 1800s. For over 100 years, Native American children were taken from their homes and tribal communities and placed in boarding schools. Often the Native children were relocated hundreds and sometimes thousands of miles from their families for a long period of time. The practice of placing Native children in boarding schools became a policy of the U.S. government as a means to assimilate them. The goal was to take the Indian out of the children in hopes to Americanize them. But the objective was to erase and replace Indian culture. The mantra was, "Kill the Indian, save the man." It is estimated that up to 500,000 Native American children were removed from their families and placed in boarding schools, although the actual number may never be known. In 1928, the U.S. government released the Miriam Report that described substandard living conditions at Indian boarding schools in 26 states. The report revealed overcrowding, poor nutrition, and lack of proper medical treatment. Even with the Miriam Report's dismal findings, Indian boarding schools existed decades later with only limited improvements. There are still active boarding schools operating in the United States today. Many Native Americans, for multiple generations, have lived with the trauma associated with the Indian boarding school experience. Too often, that trauma has led to alcoholism, drug abuse, high rates of divorce, and suicide. Various Indian boarding schools have graveyards that contain the remains of Native children who died while attending the schools. There is a movement to have the remains returned. During the summer of 2021, the remains of 9 children were returned to the Rosebud Sioux tribe from Carlisle Indian Boarding School. That same summer, the world became aware of the legacy of boarding schools when the graves with the remains of 215 school children were found at the Kamloops Industrial Residential School in British Columbia, Canada. The discovery led U.S. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland to establish a federal Indian boarding school initiative.
We must shed light on the unspoken traumas of the past, no matter how hard it will be.
The initiative will include an investigation to identify past boarding schools, the location of known and possible burial sites, and the identities and tribal affiliations of the children who were taken there. Throughout the summer, more graves at other residential schools were disclosed. Tribal communities throughout the United States began to take action towards healing by holding talking circles, rallies, and marches. But healing does not occur with a one-time event, but is a long journey. All of Indian country is waiting for the results of the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative's findings, which are due in a report to Secretary Haaland by April 1st, 2022.